So today with us is Jason Evans. You guys know Jason Evans. He's been with us before. And Jason is the Dean for the College of Food Innovation and Technology at Johnson & Wales University. He's going to talk to us about building virtually extinct, reviving human interaction for more effective teams. How many of you are seeing that human interaction is a unique thing for some of our young folks? Are you? Yeah, I see some hands up. Like what it is just a different generation, right? And so we've got to target some of our interactions. They're all using AI now, and we all need to learn how to partner with AI, but we still need those people interactions. So let me tell you a little bit about Jason. Jason is the Dean of the College of Food Innovation and Technology at Johnson & Wales University, which offers a baccalaureate and graduate programming in culinary arts, culinary science, culinary nutrition, food and beverage, entrepreneurship, and sustainable food systems on its campus in Providence, Rhode Island, and Charlotte, North Carolina. Formerly, Dr. Evans was an associate professor of agriculture business management at the State University of New York's College of Agriculture and Technology, SUNY Cobble-Skills, where he also served as the director of the Institute for Rural Vitality and chair of the Department of Agriculture and Food Management. Before joining SUNY faculty in 2009, Dr. Evans was an assistant research professor at West Virginia University, where he earned a PhD in natural resource economics in 2007. You guys have seen that he's an active participant at AFDO, and we're already thinking about the fun things that we're going to do next year. So look at Dion and Tara. We were just talking about how we're so inspired about today and what we're going to hear about and what we're going to build on today. So please join me in congratulating and inviting to the stage Dr. Evans.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. The AFDO audience is my favorite audience, so don't let me down this time, okay? I'd really appreciate it. I also have told Steve that if he keeps inviting me back to this particular event, I really am going to run out of things to talk about. So next year may just be potpourri, whatever. The AFDO team asked me this year to talk about networking. And when I hear that phrase and think about really what it is, I automatically think about in my life the people who do this really super well. And number one for me is my dad. So my dad had an 8th grade education, was at one point in his life a coal miner, went into construction, and of course we had the family farm. This guy, he never failed to get something done, whether it be a connection for auto mechanic work. I don't know that my dad ever took a car to an actual mechanic because there was a friend, a neighbor, somebody around who could fix the problem. If my dad needed an under-the-table state inspection sticker on a car, I don't know that my dad ever drove a vehicle that would actually pass an inspection. But he always had a sticker. I went to auctioneering school after high school for a summer before I went to college. I was always enamored with really good auctioneers. So I went to auctioneering school in Nashville and had to complete an apprenticeship. And my dad and I would go to cattle auctions all the time, and every time we went to one the next couple of years, at some point in the sale, the auctioneer would call me up to sell the next few lots of cattle. Dad did all of that. He knew who to talk to actually make all of that happen. He did that in every part of his life. The people who came to dinner at my house that I didn't know, that my mom didn't know, that he met in a restaurant. And when he died, the number of people at that service that none of his family knew was just incredible. And the stories of, your dad wrote me a check one time. Dad didn't have any money. Our pastor at our local church said, "Your dad was upset with me one time because the shoes I wore to preach in on a Sunday were falling apart. He bought me shoes the next week." Dad always had bags of cabbage and rhubarb and apples in the truck, and no matter where we're going, he's going to give out cabbage and rhubarb and apples to people who don't really want cabbage and rhubarb and apples. He got things done because he treated people in a way that made them want to reciprocate. They understood his intentions, and they wanted to support him in any way that they could. He was just a consummate networker. There's a story that one of the characters in my favorite television show of all time, The West Wing, told of a guy who was walking down a street and fell into a hole. The walls are so steep that he can't get out. A doctor passes by, and our guy shouts up, "Hey, you, can you help me out?" The doctor writes a prescription and throws it down in the hole and moves on. Then a priest walks by, and the guy in the hole shouts up, "Father, I'm down in this hole. Can you help me out?" The priest writes out a prayer and throws it down in the hole and moves on. Then a friend walks by. "Hey, Joe, it's me. Can you help me out?" And the friend jumps in the hole. Our guy says, "Are you stupid? Now we're both down here." The friend says, "Yeah, but I've been down here before, and I know how to get out." Isn't that what a network is for? It's the people who, because of their experiences, their training, their insights, and their connections, can help me achieve what I'm trying to achieve. It's social capital. I love that phrase. Capital indicates that there's something of worth there, right? Something that can fruit value for me. It can fruit connections. It can fruit information. It can fruit promotion. It can fruit well-being. Networks are the essence of our social capital. Now, of course, if I asked all of you in this room, and in fact, maybe I will, how many of you have gotten a job or a promotion because of your network at some point in your life? We all know, and research plays out time and time again, that having robust networks, robust connections with other people can do all of these things for, of course, it affects our ability to get a job. It affects our ability to get a promotion. It affects our job performance. If I actually need a piece of information to solve a problem that my organization has asked me to solve, if I have a network, I've got social capital. I've got something that I can leverage to actually bring to my place of work. Of course, over time, if I perform better in my job, that means salary growth, and over time, job satisfaction and buy-in. I got to tell you, I watch this play out in my office every day. The idea of buy-in at work, the idea of having some emotional connection to the place that I work in. As a leader, if I'm managing people, that is a number one top priority for me. I want the people who are coming into my office every morning wanting to be there. If they don't, almost nothing else is going to work in the long run. Nothing else is going to work in the long run. They at some point will phone the job in. Effective emotional buy-in. And if people come into the workplace and feel like they have these connections, they've got social capital, there's just a layer of trust, I think job satisfaction improves, and that means job performance improves. Networks, of course, are also for mobility, and when we think about mobility, we tend to think about economic mobility, and that's certainly one thing. But what I want to suggest to you is that a robust network actually makes us more mobile in every part of our lives. It helps us to live more flexibly. It helps us to take risks, to change our minds, and to not stand still. I could also ask you to raise your hands if any of you, and actually do, if any of you have ever been motivated to change your perspective on something, get to a different plateau, or do something different because of somebody you had a front row seat to. You were just inspired by some part of their lives. If you've shut yourself off from that, The only motivation then that you can rely on to do something different, to change your place in life, is an internal motivation. And it's great if we have that, but it's far easier if you've got a model to it. I'm always fascinated by people like my dad who just are so natural at building these connections. And I automatically think about veterans groups. Groups in the military who serve together, talk about having a personal experience with each other, where you're relying on each other to live. I wanted to dig into the research to actually see if anybody has looked at what collective military service has done for people's network and connectivity. And as it turns out, there's research that tracks all the way back to Union soldiers in the Civil War. And what that research turns out all the time is that veterans after the Civil War were much more likely to actually move to places they didn't live before, and much more likely to move to places where there were people already that they had served with. I mean, of course, they're traveling during the war and getting exposed to different places. That's part of it. But more of it is, I've got this guy in front of me who's giving me his perspective on where he lives in the world, gives me a little bit of motivation to check it out. It also showed up in their post-war employment. Veterans much more likely to move on to farm and white-collar type jobs after the Civil War because of the connectivity that they had with their veteran brethren. The same thing happened in World War I. Research shows that post-war employment was in fact affected by the post-war employment of the peers that served in the same company with them. That's incredible. That says something, right? You go through these deep experiences together where you have to trust each other. And over time, you actually influence the way each other sees their lives. That's what a robust network does. And now, of course, we have these veterans groups, veterans of foreign wars, so that those networks continue and grow stronger even when we're not in combat. So lots of work has actually gone into the economic mobility piece of these networks. And as it turns out, if people who are lower income, children who are lower income, get exposed in a meaningful way to families and children of higher income, it directly impacts their economic mobility. Children in low-income families could see potentially a 20% lifetime income increase if they grew up in areas of economic connectedness, where you actually have people across all economic strata interacting with each other in their daily lives. A few years ago, there was a massive undertaking, research undertaking, looking at social media networks of 75 million people. And one of the questions that they wanted to answer was, what is it? What part of social capital, what type of social capital impacts economic mobility the most? And so they looked at civic engagement, so the extent to which we volunteer, are in community groups together. They looked at social cohesion, just the extent to which communities are really tied together, they're personally close to each other. And then they looked at economic connectedness. So they're looking at friendship across those economic lines. What they found was one of those types of social capital, the economic connectedness, friendships and networks outside of your own income group, more than any other type of social capital, was associated with higher economic mobility. It's all about exposure. I have a sense as to what life looks like and feels like and is like for people who are very, very different from me. It's not just economic mobility, though. Being friends with and having in our network people who just think about life differently, have different political views, helps us to rewire our personal attitudes. How many of you, because of your geography or your family, came into your early adulthood with one view on something, and over the course of your life, you changed it because of the people that you met and got to know? I'm glad to see that, Because once that stops being alive and well, we are entirely in trouble as a human population, I think. You know, the truth is, this is what we all think about when we think about the value of networks. But if you really stop and think, there's much more to it than that. Just imagine the things that have happened globally, politically, because of informal connections between people. And in fact, there's a term for this. It's called track 2 diplomacy. If two nations are pitted against each other, you've got track 1 diplomacy happening all the time. That's formal diplomacy. It's government employees. It's think tank folks getting together and actually trying to make peace, trying to make a deal. But in the background, track 2 diplomacy is where you have informal exchange of ideas and culture from artists and scientists and everyday citizens. During the Cold War, the height of the Cold War, in the late 1950s, a group of Americans actually got together and put together what would become known as the Dartmouth Dialogue or the Dartmouth Process. It met at Dartmouth College for the first time in 1961. This is a group of artists and writers and scientists from America getting together with their colleagues from the Soviet Union. So you have all of this track 1 back and forth happening between the leaders of these countries. But in the background, you've literally got Soviets getting to know Americans and Americans getting to know Soviets. And the outcomes of those discussions bubble up to the actual formal diplomats so that by the time you get to the 1980s, there's this bigger sense that we're actually not different from each other in big ways. We actually think about life similarly. We have some connectedness that we didn't know before. Just an example of the ways in which personal connectivity have literally driven world events. Boy, do we need it now. That's the last political thing I'll say. Probably not. When we look at the world now, though, I don't know that we see this just hyperactive networking happening. That's why I titled the presentation Virtually Extinct, but I put a question mark on it here because I actually think that there are things that we can do, especially in the workplace, to revive it. But there's some things that have happened, some things that we've gone through that have made this maybe far less common, far less frequent, far less robust than it might have been in the past. And of course, the thing that comes top of mind first is the pandemic. So in December of 2019, Zoom had 10 million daily users. By April of 2020, 300 million daily users. MS Teams is the same way, 20 million daily in 2019, 320 million daily 2 years after that. So the problem is that this is not a natural context for networking, these virtual meetings. You all know this, right? You're in these all day long. So there's a lot of research. There's actually a branch of science called meeting science. Not meat science, meeting science, that have really begun to break down what's happening in our brains when we do something like sit in on a virtual meeting. The first thing is they're exhausting. You know, people complain about that all the time. I've had so many meetings today. They're all virtual. I'm so exhausted. So sometimes I just think that's people being lazy. But the truth is there's some science to it because in a virtual meeting, you have this prolonged eye gaze, right? You're looking at each other in their eyes. We don't tend to do that when we're actually interacting in the same space personally. And so that actually is exhausting. We spend very little time looking into each other's eyes if we're in person with each other. We should every now and then, you know, especially on a date or something, that's important. But we do it all the time in these virtual meetings. We also, of course, have this thing where these faces are big on the screen. And what that does biochemically is it actually triggers high alert, our fight or flight response. And Lord knows I feel fight or flight in a lot of virtual meetings, right? I just didn't know that's what it was. but your faces are right at me. There's also information overload. You've got 10 little tiny boxes that you're looking at, and something's happening in all of them. Now, we've all gotten much better at blurring our backgrounds, but every now and then a cat wanders by. And every now and then there's a kid screaming in the background, or somebody's spouse is clearly home too, and they just happen to be reorganizing the cabinet behind the person in the meeting on the day they've got a meeting going on. It's an information overload, not to mention the fact that there's a chat function going on at the same time. No wonder we're tired when we get done with a meeting that's virtual. Here's one that's really been bad for me. I'm not going to ask you to raise your hands. You all do it. When you're in a virtual meeting, one of the things that you're paying attention to is yourself. I cannot tell you how much face cream I have bought since 2020. Right? And every now and then you make up things like, God, I look this bad, and this must be the lighting. No. I look better on Zoom than I do in MS Teams. You say these things to yourself, right? And you know it's not true. So you go out and buy serums and face creams, and you worry about why your neck is not in the same place it was 2 years ago. Lord, nobody told me that when I worried about my face for years with moisturizer that you had to do your neck too. All right, enough about me now. You also don't know the social dynamics of the group. You don't see any communicative signaling in these virtual meetings. You don't know who's looking at whom. Have you ever thought about that? You may be unifocused on one person in the Zoom meeting for some reason or another. You don't know who's focused on whom. You don't really know who has authority. Who's in charge, right? There's nobody, it's not very clear that somebody is the focus of attention. We also, of course, multitask. How many of you are doing other things while you're in a virtual meeting? Never. I won't ask you this one. It's happened to me 5 or 10 times. I'm really bad at virtual meetings, as it turns out. For some reason, I hear my name, because it's clearly a question posed to me, and I have not listened to the setup of the question. You get pretty good at crawling out of that, though, right? So you're multitasking all together because of these things. The exhaustion, the just overstimulation, that I'm thinking about myself. I can't see any social cues. There's lower motivation to engage behaviorally and cognitively, and you can't tell me that's not true. There is lower motivation to engage entirely. And so I think that means in these virtual meeting spaces, networking, which takes engagement, is incredibly difficult. And so the pandemic in and of itself took away one of these things that we used to just do naturally in these face-to-face meetings. The virtual meetings are not fun. We all just want off of the meeting. Do you remember the amount of business that used to get done in a face-to-face meeting before and after the meeting, right? 2 summers ago, leadership at Johnson & Wales planned a weekly series, and these were 3 or 4 hour-long face-to-face meetings for a strategic planning process. These were long meetings. Halfway through the summer, it became very clear we're actually getting more business done before the meeting, at the lunch break, and after the meeting than we are during the meetings. And so they canceled most of the last half of the summer's meetings, but instead put on the calendar 2 or 3 basically round-robin type casual sessions where I'm just able to interface with the dean from the other college, with the staff over here. A lot of business got done. You don't do that in the virtual space. So this has knocked us off our axis just a little bit, that the way we meet with each other has changed. This second block, I'm not known as a good news speaker. This second block is actually something that I talk about a lot. And in fact, I've talked about it with this audience. I've talked about it at the Food Safety Summit. This just general cultural malaise. And it's really this idea of isolation and loneliness and depression and anxiety that we all feel culturally. It's empirically a thing. And I don't know what else to call it outside of a cultural malaise because it is so multifaceted. But in a matter of 2 years, depression and anxiety rates, self-reported, up almost 3%. Half of U.S. adults say, I experience loneliness. And loneliness and isolation, as it turns out, are more widespread than a lot of other major health issues of our day, including diabetes, obesity, smoking. But the problem is that loneliness and isolation have comparable risk to health and premature death as those other things. Polls conducted in 1972 showed that 45% of Americans said they could reliably trust other Americans. That portion has shrunk to 30%, and that was by 2016. I don't know what that number is now, but I assure you it's less than that. When we just think about the average amount of time we all spend alone, just between 2003 and 2020, that fell from 285 minutes a day, or increased from 285 minutes a day to 333 minutes a day. That's 24 hours a month in a very short amount of time that we're spending alone that we didn't before. The amount of time we engage with friends in that same time period fell from 60 minutes a day to 20 minutes a day. It's even bigger when you isolate 15 to 24-year-olds. 150 minutes a day in 2003, 40 minutes a day in 2020. About half of Americans say I have 3 or fewer close friends. 15 years ago, that was just a quarter of Americans. We are not spending time in social interaction the way that we were. And it is affecting our mental health. There's no question about it. This is very personal to me. I feel it. And some of you feel it. And I know you say, well, can't you just call up a buddy and go have dinner or something? And it really isn't that easy. It's just this cultural pandemic. The reasons that this has happened, well, when I was here last year or a couple of years ago, and we're talking about these cultural undercurrents, one of the things that science suggests is that at least for young people, that this earlier onset of puberty is causing this collision in young people's heads where their social brains are developing quicker than they did a generation ago, but they're still kids. And they don't know how to make that work in their heads. They're biologically being driven to build relationships, right? They're hitting puberty, but they're not ready for it. And so it's causing anxiety, it's causing confusion, and it's driving them potentially to social media. Of course, media itself is part of the core, the foundation of this cultural malaise. There's no way around that. In 2024, the average screen time among Americans was 5 hours and 16 minutes a day. 5 hours and 16 minutes a day. If you multiply that by 7 days, that's a day and a half every week. A day and a half every week of screen time. 1 in 3 adults 18 and over say they are online almost constantly. And for those who say that they're online almost constantly, their odds of reporting social isolation, loneliness, are double that of people who are 30 minutes or less per day. I also think that just as a Western society, we're even more individualistic than we used to be. This idea that we're planting children with, that focusing on myself, me doing well, is my pathway to happiness and success. That was always part of the American ideal. It was always part of the American dream, the cowboy, right? I'm going to do this myself and pick myself up by my bootstraps. It is even deeper now. And it neglects community. It neglects the importance of actually working together to achieve things and even to feel good about myself. Our individualistic culture, I just think, is becoming more and more pronounced. This third one is actually super interesting to me. These are 2 very related but different concepts: friending bias and social sorting. This is not necessarily about the fact that networks are crumbling or are becoming less frequent. The quality of them is changing because of friending bias and social sorting. Friending bias is this tendency for people to befriend people in similar socioeconomic statuses, all right? Befriending people who basically are part of the same socioeconomic class. Sorting is this process whereby I begin to associate my social identity, my gender, my race, my occupation with my political identity. So two different things, but what it's doing collectively is it means that we are just exposing ourselves less and less to people who are different from us. The reasons they're happening: first of all, increased residential segregation. More so now than 60 years ago, people of different socioeconomic classes are living in very different places, much more than 60 years ago. We're also intermarrying less. You ever thought about that? Imagine your grandparents' day when not everybody went to college. In fact, very few people went to college. And if you went to college, it was probably because you had the academic standing to do so. That meant that on campuses across the country, you have people of very different economic backgrounds living and mixing with each other and ultimately marrying. And for those people coming from low-income households, as I've already said, that economic connectedness meant immediate economic mobility. We're not intermarrying as much anymore, in part because one of the places where that economic mixing used to happen was in churches and civic groups and recreational groups. Guess what we're doing less of now? All of those things. Church membership rates, even since the 1990s, have fallen from 70% of Americans to 40% of Americans. That happened overnight. So these places where we actually used to find people and talk to people different from ourselves, we're not doing those things anymore. Some other things have happened, though. Tracking in schools, where more and more we're finding ways to put high performers together and leave everybody else together, right? So specialized schools, the charter school system, the very competitive lottery school systems that are happening all over the country, where if I have the wherewithal to write an essay, have parents who are on me about doing well in middle school, I can actually get into a different high school, even if it is a public school, than you can or you can, and this segregation just deepens and deepens. When we consolidated schools in the 1970s and 1980s, we made big populations where it's much easier to click, where it's much easier for kids to actually just partition themselves into very, very small groups. Your grandparents probably went to high school and graduated with far fewer than 100 kids. That doesn't happen in many places today. The cost of extracurricular activities. If my family is lower income, I can't afford for my kid to do the sports where they might connect with somebody very different from them. It's just putting me out of the game. Less church and civic organization attendance, and here's the big one. Since the 1970s, the level of just income inequality in this country, for a number of reasons, has exploded. Listen to this. I'm not saying this politically. I'm saying this objectively. Listen to this. The bottom 20% of income earners in the United States hold 3% of total income. 20% of income earners hold 3% of our total income. The top 20% hold 52% of the income generated in the United States. And if you knock that back even further and just look at the top 5% of income earners, 24% of all income generated. It's impossible for that to happen and us to still feel like we have things in common. Your family used to have a few more dollars than I did. Now you have a world more dollars than I did. We like different things. We have different opportunities. We have different tastes. We very much live in different places. We're not marrying each other anymore. We're completely separated. That's this idea of friending bias, that we stick with our crew, and that really impacts the quality of our networks, the effectiveness of those networks. This idea of social sorting, where my personal identity, my gender, my race, my everything is hitched to my political identity, means one thing. It means that changing my political identity is almost impossible. I am a rock, and you are not going to move me, because what I believe politically is tied to my race, to my gender, to where I live, and everything else about me. That's happened for a lot of reasons, but it really escalated post-civil rights, where it was very clear that if you're of a certain minority group, there is a political party that aligns with your interests. And so from here on out, my skin color, my racial identity connects me to a political party. Elite influence does the same thing. It is far easier for me, if I'm running for a political office, if every white middle-class American in the room has the same political beliefs. It's far easier for me to run for office, because now I can just target all of my messaging to white middle-class people, right? There are things that that group responds to, and that's what my messaging is going to be. And media plays this up too, of course. So what we've done is we've tranched ourselves, right? Because I am this, I believe this politically. And it's very difficult to get me to move. And the data shows that. I saw this at a conference years ago, and this is older data, and it's gotten even worse. But this was really moving to me. So what this is, between, I really should put my glasses on, you know that? But then I can't see my notes. I'm very old. What this shows is median ideology for Democrats and Republicans. And what you see in 1994 and 2004 is purple. A lot of good policy gets made in the purple. That's where we all come together and believe basically the same thing. The median beliefs on key platform issues very close together in those 2 years. Come 2014, look at the divide there. Look at the divide there. It's very difficult for me to agree with you on anything politically if my politics are tied to my being and yours are tied to your being. Very, very difficult. These two things, friending bias and social sorting, are really just suggesting that as these continue to happen, not only is it harder to network, but when we have networks of people, it's basically me multiplied many times over. I'm hanging out with myself. I am hanging out with myself. And while I enjoy hanging out with myself, it does not do much for me in terms of changing the way I think, changing my efficacy, changing what I can do for my employer, changing how I promote myself. All right? Okay. And that's just data that shows what I was talking about, where this is from this 75 million user, social media user study looking at friending across socioeconomic groups. So in this highest socioeconomic group, 34% of their connections, their friends, are from the same socioeconomic group. Not really diversifying there. Okay. All right. So this all sounds, pretty bad. I think we have a hope, though. I highly doubt that we're going to get people divorced from their screens. I highly doubt that culturally we're going to go back to hanging out at the Elks Club and church. I doubt it. We may not even convince ourselves to hang out with friends casually more. The workplace is still the place with the best hope for bridging connection between people who are different from each other, who think different from each other. And the workplace, of course, when that happens, benefits greatly. So in the workplace, if I've got really healthy networks, I think we solve problems more efficiently and more effectively. I think our culture is better. It leads to workforce or worker satisfaction. I think you need internal healthy networks for determining what I like to call the adjacent possible. That's what happens in those lunch meetings. That's what happens in the 20 minutes after a formal meeting. We're talking about what can we do next? We're talking about what are we not doing that we could do? And that's so inspiring to me to be in those conversations with people leading very different parts of the university who just think about the world differently than I do. I take a ton from that, and I can't tell you the amount we've gotten done. Even at Johnson & Wales, I can't tell you the amount we've gotten done because of this idea that I need robust conversation to think about what we're doing, what we're not doing that we could. And for individual employee mobility, listen, when workplaces stop caring about their employees' ability to promote and even promote out of the organization, that kills culture instantaneously. I want my team always being ambitious, even if their ambitions mean leaving Johnson & Wales. The best thing I can do for you as a leader is to set you up to have big impact, even if it's not in my organization, right? None of this happens if we don't have these really super healthy networks. Okay, so here's what we do then. I want to give you some advice. And this isn't coming, I told the Food Safety Summit audience, I'm really not very well read on networking or on leadership. I'm just not. This is just what I'm doing every day. And some of it is working. And so I want to talk about what's working. So if the workplace is our place of hope here for re-engaging networks, some advice to managers. Well, we already know that we're stuck in these virtual meetings, and that's going to be okay, but we've got to do them right. First thing is, realize that meetings can be seen as disruptive interruptions. How many of you think about meetings that way? You come to work, you're plodding along, you're getting good stuff done, and now I've got to stop for an hour. You literally see a meeting as a disruption. Isn't that interesting? That a meeting is actually supposed to be a way that we're going to get things done. That's the ticket to it. The way we get our teams to see even these virtual meetings as something beyond a disruption is that we, the leader, ensures the meeting has a deliverable. The people in this meeting are going to walk away with something they did not have before. Meeting science tells us that. I see this far less disruptive if I know I'm going to get something out of this that I didn't have before, right? The other thing that I would suggest from a manager's standpoint is that because you're not going to knock all of that out, some people are still going to see this as a disruption to their day, cranking through that meeting is advisable. I think you need a facilitator. I think you've got to have somebody on these meetings that are keeping it moving. And if the conversation is trailing off into something that is not useful to the people in the room, we've got to move along. And I think a facilitator is important for doing that. These shorter meeting agendas, but real agendas with follow-up items. This is something a couple of years ago that I really started believing in because I was surprised even myself at how effective this was. I think that many meetings should end with homework, should end with action items, and where I can make those action items team-centric, especially cross-unit teams, I would like you to work with you on strategizing something. I would like you to work with you on coming up with a solution to this particular problem. In my system in Johnson & Wales, yes, we're academia, but in Providence, we have 50 labs. All of them are kitchens or bake shops or food science labs. The amount of equipment and food and materials that have to be in those spaces every day at specific times is sort of a logistics nightmare. I've got to have my faculty and my operations team and my storeroom team together on those issues all the time, face-to-face if possible, but the virtual meeting is the place where I lay the assignment. I want everybody outside of a formal meeting space. Get together on your own time. I want you to crank on this problem. Maximize active participation. So this is what catches me sometimes when I'm multitasking. I think asking for report outs. I think asking everybody on the meeting to play some role in the meeting is important. Or otherwise, I don't care who you are, you're going to have people on that thing who are doing nothing and thinking nothing about what's happening in the meeting. Make sure that everybody has an opportunity and a reason to actually participate actively. For building and leveraging networks, you all know this. How many of you are familiar with the idea of the Matthew effect? You heathens, it's biblical. The Matthew effect. Matthew 25:29 effectively says, he who has will be given more. Basically, the idea is if you have a lot and you take care of it and you build on what you have, you'll be given more. But from a networking standpoint, it means one thing. If you're good at networking, networking is going to benefit you the most. If you are an extrovert and you really like going up to people and starting random conversations, clearly to those who have will be given more. You're going to benefit the most from this. You can't have a really well-functioning network in your place of work if everybody isn't benefiting in some way, even the introverts. And I got to tell you, I am a deep introvert. I'm a deep introvert. It's really not, but it's the reason why when I come to speak somewhere, after I get off the stage, I run to the airport. I'm kidding. That's because the person who helps me with my travel isn't very good at it, as it turns out. I'm a deep introvert. That's why I really enjoy doing this. I'm not having a conversation with you. I'm having a conversation at you. This is more comfortable for me than actually sitting at a table with strangers and talking. And so, what I've learned over time and what I've tried to start implementing with my team is developing in-person scenarios that facilitate relationship building for everyone. And you know what makes it easy? How many of you have done something like, oh, this is a really stupid example, paint and sip? You love your paint and sip, right? Yes, mostly the sip. But, and then you take home these, I'm sorry, but these really, really bad paintings that then you, oh, I'm sure yours are great, that then you have to do something with. The point of a paint and sip for an introvert is that I don't have to come up with something to talk about. We're both doing the same thing. We're both struggling on the same task. There's moments of levity. There's moments of humor. Oh, I screwed that up. Let's talk about that for a second. It is an icebreaker. On my team, I love putting my chef faculty together in a room where most of them are doing something they've never done before. And they have to work as a team on it, right? So butchery, for instance. To have a team building event with my baking and pastry faculty around blood sausage making, it was fabulous. I mean, it looked like a murder scene. And I'm not great with blood. So the blood sausage workshop, not so much for me. But for that team, they were all struggling through this mess the same way. There's so much to talk about right there in front of you. And all of a sudden, we're talking about our kids. And we're talking about work. And we're talking about what we'd like to do. And we're talking about what we do in our classrooms. I think this is even better if you're allowing your team to come up with ideas for what these literally team-building activities can be. And for those of you that interact with other agencies, and so in the inspector world, of course, you're working in your regulatory entity. Look at the restaurant and food businesses that you're interacting with for your job. How awesome would it be if you actually had some fun, casual, in-person event where all you're doing is making fun of each other's paint and sip? Would that not translate over time to a much more comfortable working environment? And you're telling these people sometimes lots of things they don't want to hear. And your jobs as inspectors are sometimes very isolating. Wouldn't it be great if you knew you had a bunch of people you could pick up the phone and talk to? One of my favorite things that I've seen in the last year, there's this company called Federal Signal. They make sirens. Can you imagine trying to describe what you do for a living? We make sirens. Big company though, and you never think about that, right? When you see a cop car driving by, who makes the siren and the lights? Federal Signal does. They do this thing for their employees every year where they literally pick a city that have a bunch of universities in it, and they contact those universities to curate this group of really fun classes. Welding, flower design, art, baking, culinary, history. And they pay for their employees to go to this city, and the employees can just select from all of these classes that they take. It's happening in Providence this coming year. So these employees get to select from super awesome classes at Rhode Island School of Design, cooking classes at Johnson Wales, Brown University. They will talk nothing of work. None of their meetings will be content relevant. It's just they're hanging out with each other and learning together. And I think that that's a fantastic way to get even introverts moving into a network. There's something that actually surfaced in the 1960s, and this seems counterintuitive. This idea of employee resource groups. I know diversity is important, and it's what I've been talking about a lot. But the truth is, in everybody's organization, you have employees, you have people that are far more comfortable hanging out with people who look like them, who have the same hobbies as them, the same gender, the same anything. Xerox in the 1960s realized that their black workforce was marginalized, and so they built a formal employee resource group, basically a black caucus, that was so successful in just improving workplace culture that it got copied among some of the biggest organizations in the country, and they still happen today at AT&T, at Johnson & Johnson, Eli Lilly. Employee resource groups, these groups that are based around veteran status, professional interest, racial identity, gender identity, and they're just casual. They're going out and bowling. They're going out and having lunch. They're going out on a weekend. The reason why these are just as important as events and activities that celebrate diversity is because research actually shows that there are some problems that are better solved in homogeneous groups, primarily really simple things. If I've got a simple problem that requires a simple solution, the truth is getting a group together who already trust each other, knows each other, they have similar intentions, they like each other, you're going to get to the solution far quicker than pulling this just highly diverse, cross-cutting team together to do it. The highly diverse cross-cutting team is for the much more complex tasks where we require innovation. Diversity is for innovation, putting people together who think differently. That's where innovation comes from. But I've got simple problems that happen in my office all day long. I'm just going to put heads together that hang out together anyway. They're going to get to it quicker. They can dispose of the mistrust and all of those things that happen when you don't know each other. So there is a value to diversity, but there's also a value to making sure that the people who work in my system find their buddies, find folks that they identify with. I used to teach sales. When I was in an ag business management program, sales was one of the areas that I taught in. And for a long time, this idea of dense and sparse networks has been a part of every sales curriculum in the world. I think it's important in your system to have both types of networks. So this is actually drawn right from a page of a sales textbook. A dense network is one where all of the people that I know basically the same people. It's dense. There's not thousands of people in this network, all right? This is the network that I need if, for instance, I'm maybe going to be on the market here in the next couple of months after divorce. I need this close-knit group who all know a similar close-knit group. And the benefit of that close-knittedness is that they know me, they know my intentions, and they can collectively help make my case to this person who may be interested in Jason Evans, you know? There's a value to dense networks. And in our workplaces, this is where, when we require real coordination, this is valuable. The relationships are already there. They're tight-knit. They move in the same circles. We know the same people. They're valuable. Sparse networks have a very different use. A sparse network is where the three people I know all know very different people. This is a sparse network. You guys are all coming from different jobs. You're coming from different states all over the country. All of you know different people than the people sitting at your table. So let me try this and see if this works. I'm going to try to show you the benefit of a sparse network. If I told you that I needed a meeting with an undersecretary of Health and Human Services, I need a meeting with an undersecretary of Health and Human Services. Can somebody in this room do that for me? Or can somebody who has direct contact with somebody else do that for me? Raise your hand. Who could do that for me? Great. There were hands in the background. All right, let's ratchet it up. I now need a meeting with the Secretary of Health and Human Services. Can anybody do that for me? Oh, that's disappointing. The sparse network is what I needed when I needed this really nuanced, far-flung thing to happen. The more people that are indirectly attached to me through that sparse network, the higher the likelihood that I'm going to be able to get this done. Imagine having a team in your workplace where you've got a mixture of dense networks where they can really work together. They can pull on the same strings. They know the same people at the same time, but also people in my system who know collectively 1,000 different people. Imagine the information, imagine the work that we can get done with the combination of those two things happening at the same time. All right. So that's the advice to people who are managing people. Here's the advice to actual people. And to some extent, this is drawn right from that classic text, How to Win Friends. So yes, I'm going to end the presentation by talking a little bit about how to win friends, because that's what this is, right? This is how do I get as many people in my life as possible who would jump in the hole with me when I'm in the hole. Sometimes those holes are really complex and sticky. Sometimes they're pretty simple. But the more people, the bigger the network, the more likely I am to get out of them. Never forget that networks are circular. This is basically the golden rule, right? If I've got somebody who is always there for me, doing me favors, providing me information, getting me connected where I need to get connected, even if I can't do anything directly for them in a tit for tat, the more that I'm out here doing maybe for other people, there's a reputation thing there, right? That Jason guy, seriously, he does what he says he's going to do. I've asked him for help a number of times, and he's been very, very helpful for me. Networks are circular, and if you forget that, your network might fall apart. You may be seen as grabby. This person always needs something from me, but they don't seem to be available for anybody else, right? Be known as a helpful person. Number two, I told you I'm an introvert, but when I interact with you, if you get the chance, right, remember, it will be personal and it will be authentic. I'm not kidding. I talked to two people this morning for a matter of 10 minutes. That got pretty personal, didn't it, Mandy? Yeah, she was uncomfortable. Listen, every one of you love talking about yourselves. You love it. You get that little flitter in your heart when somebody asks you a question about your viewpoint, your life, yourself. I love it, and all of you do too. I think this is the quickest way to authentically make friends. Don't just ask people, how'd you get here? How'd you do what you do? What do you think about this? Ask it and mean it. And you're going to get those questions in response, right? Just authentically making a connection. I actually, and I've gotten in trouble for this a little bit in my professional life. I don't think anything is sacred. Just because I might be somebody's boss doesn't mean there are parts of my life that I'm purposefully going to hide from you. I think as we get to know each other, I really want you to know me. How will you know my intentions if you don't really know me? And so I think it's okay to be casual with your team. I think it's okay to share with your team. And I want my team sharing with each other. So how to win friends, it's authentic. It's asking personal questions. I actually like the idea even of interviews with network potentials. And so if there's somebody that I'm really trying to vet as somebody I might want in my life, I actually think it's okay to go up to somebody and say, hey, I know it's a virtual meeting, but I just have some questions for you. Can I spend 15 minutes with you? And it's not about work yet. It's about life. It's about views. It's about perspective, okay? Do what you say you will do. I hate going to something like the National Restaurant Show and walking up to somebody's booth, and the first thing that they do, you all have experienced this, is they want to pull out their phones and take a picture of the QR code on my ID badge. Maybe you just ask my name. And then when you get back from the conference, you get all of these auto emails from all of these people who met you at the National Restaurant Show. You didn't meet me. You don't even know my last name. Something in the background did this for you. So I actually think that when you're at a conference like this, I did develop the habit a long time ago of making notes on people that handed me cards or that I had conversations with. And sometimes they were physical descriptions. God, I hope nobody ever finds those notes, right? But it's a note to myself about the conversation I had, giving me some context so that when I do get back to my office, I remember what that conversation was about. I am going to reach out. I don't know if we're ever going to interact professionally, but I am going to reach out. I think that's a great habit to get into. You know what I love? I love when my friends text and say, hey, just checking in, how you doing? There may not be anything going on in my life. You all love that. I think that's an important thing to do with your professional networks too. I think it's great to just reach out and say, hey, just want to check in, how you doing? Because then the next time you reach out to say, I need some help with something, you seem far less like just a transactional person, all right? Authenticity in these relationships is the way to do it. LinkedIn is great. It is. But I think we just have to balance this with some in-person networking time. Those of you in the room who are probably 35 or above are probably doing a lot of head shaking during this presentation. You know what personal connectivity has done for your lives and for your careers. And then we all get together and we lament the fact that the 30-year-old crowd doesn't get it. Their life just isn't as rich as ours is because they don't know how to talk to people. We're not going to correct that culturally. We're just not. The workplace is where we can begin building that skill set for authentically connecting with people who can actually make my life so much better. And that's what networks do. Thank you. Hey, look at that. I do have time for questions. Are you really going to be single in a couple of months? Yes. So if you know anybody.
So first of all, you never disappoint. Thank you so much for spending time with us.
You're welcome.
But actually, you do disappoint because now we're all like, well, what do we do with our kids?
Oh.
Since we're not going to fix them.
Well, yeah, you're right. Listen, the only hope that you've got is that and I do talk with in my major friend group, I really am the only one without children. And that makes me sometimes question, for the first time in my life, did I do this right? Because I see that their entire lives now are about their children. What I can do from the sideline, though, is I sometimes, and I get a little judgy about it, I watch how the parents are falling into the exact same traps that their kid is caught in. That when their kid is literally trying to have a conversation with them, the parent could not be more distracted. And sometimes it's with this stupid thing. I think we are modeling some behavior that's actually just doubling down on how the kid thinks about the world anyway. That nobody's ever really going to authentically pay attention to me. My life is now going to be just this collection of 3-second bursts of joy as I'm scrolling. I have talked to my friends about that, and they don't like it very much. But I've gone to eat with them when they bring their kids, and the very first, and I'm not judging you if you do this, kind of. The very first thing that happens when you sit down with the 2-year-old is, oh my God, where's the tablet? Is the tablet in the car? Did we bring the tablet? Christ, we didn't bring the tablet. What are we going to do? Why don't we just talk to the kid? Modeling good behavior is the only option we've got, I think, honestly. And you hope that they develop great friends, you know?
So I had the unique opportunity to spend some time with you on your campus and watch you walk through the university and interact with the students and faculty and staff. Could you talk to the folks a little bit about what you do to be intentional about building those relationships? Because I saw it. It was like, this is the culture you want to create in a workplace. How did you do that? What do you do to be intentional about that?
So that question is really dear to my heart, and if I thought about it for too long, I'd cry, Steve. Really, that's a very special question to me. I really am trying to do what I'm saying to do. When I connect with people, including students, it is authentic. I love letting my students know that they know how to do things that I don't know how to do. I really even like letting students in on my life a little bit. That was even more possible when I was a teacher. We actually ended up having so many what we ended up calling fireside chats at my house. You want to come over? Come over, and we're going to talk about just really super interesting things. I want you to see my life. I want you to know me as a person. So when I'm walking through the hallways and these kids will just sometimes go out of their way to say hello to me and run up to me and remind me of a conversation that we had in the last week, that's why I do this job. I know that all of what some of those 20-year-olds need and 18-year-olds need is somebody to connect to. And I don't let my title or my position get in the way of that. That's the key to authenticity, right? Okay, so at some point I may have to pull rank and be your boss. But I don't have to do that every day. I don't have to do that every day. So long as I'm the guy in the background that's keeping conversations moving, putting teams together, you don't have to see me as that guy when I'm walking down the hallway. I don't want you to. I want you to see me as somebody you want to say hello to. Authenticity. Yeah. Hi.
Thank you. Do you have any ideas for a lower budget idea? If you can't send people out to a particular state to do that type of, university training, do you have any general ideas you've seen that worked? And,
Yep.
and even if you can't bring everybody together, you might have to do regional, like 3 different things in different parts of the state for travel reasons. Any ideas on those?
Yeah, 2. Volunteerism is number 1, right? If it's not just this formal, fun training that the company might have to pay something for, hitch yourself to a handful of local nonprofit organizations who every now and then need teams of weekend warriors for cleanup, for running an event, for whatever. That's another one of those environments where it's all new to us. We're all learning it at the same time. We're going to fumble about a little bit. We automatically have something to talk about, even the introverts. Local volunteer activities that cost you nothing. The second one I would say is, and this really tugs at allowing people to talk about themselves, I think everybody on your team brings something that the rest of the team might have fun learning about, right? So why don't you lead a book club meeting? Why don't you come and teach a painting class, and we'll invite other people on the team to it? I think rely on your employees. They're all bringing some skill to the table that they might like to show off, right? Those are 2 ideas. As I'm saying that, I'm thinking, God, what would I teach as a skill workshop? Okay, don't ask me, because I don't really have anything. Auctioneering, perhaps. Yeah. Good question. I think there's one back there.
Hi there. This is our second year here, and I just want to say really quickly, because you're at the airport before we can even catch you. It's great hearing you talk. We get a lot out of the 2 times we've seen you speak.
That's great.
My question is, and it's personal as well as professional as well, is that you know, whenever anybody mentions anything political now, it's an immediate prickle about what's going to come out of their mouth.
Yeah.
I want to know if you have any good advice on how to open up those bridges and not feel like it's such a personal attack on when speaking to another person.
So I think that's a really important question. And as I said, the reason it feels like a personal attack is that more now than ever, I have hitched my political ideology to every other part of my identity. I believe how I believe politically because I am a male in the Northeast, I'm white, I'm a certain income group. So it's really hard to detach me from those political beliefs. First things first is tone. Even if I'm having a conversation about something that to me is very serious, and I really do maybe take issue with the way you believe about a certain political issue, I'm not going to approach it that way. Humor is always my starting point, right? So if we can start the conversation with some levity, pressure's off, we're just talking. And instead of the conversation ultimately going to politicians, but rather core political platform ideas, those are always going to end up more successful than actually talking about somebody who's currently in office right now or what they just did yesterday, right? So, and that's really where we should all be living culturally. These bigger, ideal conversations. I deal with this in my family. So I'm from Southern West Virginia. And for those of you who are south of the Mason-Dixon, you know what I mean when I say a holler, right? I grew up in a holler, and my family still lives in the holler, and it's my favorite place on earth. I miss it dearly, especially now that I live in the hustle and bustle of Rhode Island, which is hustle and bustle, surprisingly. When I have those conversations at home, though, I try to start them at a different point. So there's levity, there's softness, there's calmness, but I might just look at something happening in our backyard, right? And not talk about it from a political standpoint, but just an ideological standpoint, right? Let's actually talk about healthcare a little bit, right? Mom, let's chat about the experiences that you've had in the last 2 years with doctors and insurance companies. Let's talk about that. What did you run into? Well, as it turns out, everybody in your age group and your economic situation is running into the same thing. What do you think would make it better? What do you think would make it better? So I'm not preaching my ideology necessarily. It is a conversation, a very big one. What's your perspective on what makes it better? But it is hard at the end of those for it to not end in fisticuffs sometimes. I understand that. But I just think from the get-go, you've got to set the tone. This is not something I'm coming at you about. Yeah. Good question. Hard question. Big question of the day.
Hi, so I saw you speak, I think 2 years ago.
Yeah.
And you spoke about the different age groups and changing values. I know that in my department, we've had a hard time hiring younger people because, well, I don't really know the reason, but I suspect that it's because they need to make money.
Yeah.
They need to make money and we don't pay well. Is there anything, aside from we have raised pay, is there anything that you've seen work in the past to, I guess, I don't want to say change young people's values and minds, but that.
Yes.
To make public service seem like the way to go.
Yes. So first things first, every day you have to message your message. You have to message your why, right? The why of why my organization exists. If it did not exist, then we would be in a pickle out here. And that speaks to this generation's kind of passive activism, right? They want to save the world. They really do. And they know they're going to have to. I fear that they're not actually activist enough to make it happen because they've gotten a little bit lazy about how they express opinions. I can just lay an opinion down and walk away from it with no consequences. But I think you have to start there, that every day within and outside of your organization, we are talking about why this is important. Just like the speaker this morning, answer the why first of what I do. Second, professional development. So I can't pay you a big salary, but here's what your 10-year trajectory in this organization looks like. And if you don't have those trajectories, if you can't tell a 21-year-old, hey, if you come into this organization and you do all the right things, we can get you to here within 5 years or 10 years, it will be a struggle. This generation, believe it or not, is looking for so many safe spaces. Again, kind of pulling on this morning's presentation. They're looking for safe spaces. And I actually have some hope that that means over time, this is a generation that's going to stay at a workplace longer than the generation that preceded them. But if you can't set for them what this is going to look like 5 or 10 years down the road, I do think that's worth an organizational conversation to say, how do we build professional development that turns into a management track, that turns into mobility? Not just economic mobility, but once you get here, you actually have the option of picking where you're working and how you're working. It's more than just money. It's a safe place that I can actually land in. They're worried about college debt. They're worried about everything. They know they're not going to get their debt paid down in 2 years. But does this organization offer me something where my debt load will be at least a little more manageable in 5 years? I don't know if you can do that, but I think every organization at least can build in formal professional development so that that employee promotes within or promotes out. I think that's an important part of the message too, right? I want to set you up for success. I hope it's in my organization, but at the very least, I want to give you some skills that you can take into the world even if you leave me. That's going to resonate really well with that crew too. Yeah. You better shore up your HR departments though. There's some baggage that they bring into work. Yeah.
Thanks again, I appreciate that. And you say promote in or promote out. I wonder, I think for me, the culture in the United States particularly is too centered about, to be successful, you have to move up into another role, into management or supervisor or whatever. But I think there needs to be at least equal, if not greater value in being you're going to be a frontline worker for a long time, and that's where the maximum value is. I was wondering what your perspective might be on that approach, and it maybe a larger cultural shift that may need to happen.
I am so glad you said that because it gives me an opportunity to clarify something. Economic mobility, when you use that phrase, automatically sparks an image of a ladder, right? I'm climbing up. I really don't think about it that way. It's part of it, right? Everybody would like the idea of making more money 10 years down the road and having more economic flexibility. But if you're giving me an opportunity to promote, it really could just be that I'm promoting into a job that strokes my interests more, that strokes my skill set more, that allows me to live in a place that I want to live. And the good news is I do think this generation thinks about it that way, right? It's balance, it's life and work balance. And if this job maybe doesn't pay me a whole lot more, but gives me flexibility of all sorts, that has value to me. I'm going through this myself right now. I am a middle manager, very personal, in a midlife crisis. And to all the midlife crisisers in the room, I'm with you. And what I'm asking myself is, in my next move, and I'm perfectly happy where I am for the time being, I really am. I have to promote up, or I need to maybe go back to my first love, which was teaching. And for me, going back to a classroom environment where I've now had a little bit of a taste of management and leadership, I know what it's like. I feel good about what I did, but now having the flexibility to return back to something that pulls at my heart every day, for me, that's a promotion, you know? So I do think about it broadly. Good question.
And along those lines of that kind of conversation, what I'm seeing is trying to find people who want to be supervisors. So I find good people within my division, and I start to talk with them about, you know, their next move. And they're like, heck no, I don't want to oversee anybody. That work is too hard. People are mean, they're uncivil. So what do you have to say about that?
Yeah, so somebody had that conversation with me many, many times, many years ago. You know, I think if you really have identified somebody who not only has the technical chops for leading an organization, I think it's more important than that, and you confidently believe that they have the personal chops for it, right? That this is somebody who can disarm conflict. This is somebody who can bring people together. This is somebody that, even though they make hard decisions, can earn respect. I think if you're confident that that's the person in front of you, that's the conversation to say, no, no, no. It's not just that I think you're smart. It's not just that I think you can do this technically. As a leader, I can tell you, you have the core personality to make people want to work for you. And I think that that just becomes a very personal conversation then about your own journey into being a leader. And you, at the end of the day, also have to say, look, no matter how good you might be at this and how suited personally you might be, which I think you are, you're not going to win everybody. As a boss, you're going to have people who do not like you, who do not respect you, and those decisions are going to go down hard sometimes. And then it becomes a conversation about compartmentalizing, right? You have to figure out how to pull those really awful personal experiences as a leader away from the rest of your life without it making you aloof and cold. How many of you have met even politicians before, and when you meet them, you're super disappointed in how cold they've become? Well, that's compartmentalization to an extreme. They're making hard decisions, they're doing hard things, and they've learned to separate, they've just learned to separate that from their lives so much that there's no feeling left in their lives. You've got to guard against that. But I think that conversation is warranted. I think you're personally suited for it. Times are going to get tough every now and then. Compartmentalization is really important. Got to be able to lay it there, you know? It's all you can do. Except events like this, especially events that actually do make an effort to put in non-technical content, softer content about leadership, where they can have real conversations with people who've been there and done that, send those folks to these events. Send them to these conferences, right? Hearing from somebody like this morning, which is talking about trauma and getting through trauma, that would be moving, I think, to somebody who questions whether they think about life and the world the same way other people do. Give them an opportunity to interact with people who lead. Yeah. Or not. Hey, listen, this really is my favorite audience, and I do this all over the place, but you are my favorite audience. I really appreciate your listening and you being engaged. Thank you.